There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sharon the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another book haul. I finally just finished editing and posting the last one and it got me in the mood to catch up. So this is another catch-up book haul, mostly, in fact, maybe entirely books I got from that same charity book sale in early June for $1 or $2 a book. And then that'll be the end of those. My next book haul, I may get completely up to date with all the other brand new stuff or, new releases and stuff that I bought. So stay tuned, but this is all, I'm pretty sure, completely backlist. First is a gorgeous hardcover. I think I actually used to have this exact hardcover back in the day. Alice Munro's The Love of a Good Woman, her 1998 collection. I, as far as my memory goes, have not read it, so I'm looking forward to reading it in this gorgeous, probably first edition, but as I said in my last book haul, I don't care about first editions, but I do care about hardcovers. Kendra, Buddy Reed. Here's a short story collection by a Saskatchewan Métis author, Just Pretending by Lisa Bird Wilson. She has since this had a novel published fairly recently that I have not read, that I've heard mixed reviews on, but I picked this up to give her a try myself. This was from 2013. Jean Rhys, her most well-known novel, Wide Sargasso Sea, the sequel to Jane Eyre. Ben of, his channel name's gone out of my head. His Instagram is Ben the Fen, I think. What is his channel name? Anyway, he's got an awesome channel, and he and I did a quasi-buddy read of her earlier novel. What was it? After Leaving Mr. Mackenzie last year, and it was my first anything by Jean Rhys, and I've picked this up. I've read one short story collection by the Irish author Bernard MacLaverty, and this is his latest novel as far as I'm aware. He may have had one more out since this came out a couple years ago. This was published in 2017. Heard good things about it at the time and picked up a brand new copy. Looks on red for $3. Let's listen to the opening paragraph. In the bathroom, Stella was getting ready for bed. Jerry had left the shaving mirror at the magnifying face and she was examining her eyebrows. She licked the tip of her index finger and smoothed both of them, then turned to her eyelids. She was sick of it all. The circles of cotton wool, the boiled and sterilized water in the saucer, the ointments, the waste bin full of cotton buds. Well, that sounds like my pre-filming routine just before I go live on camera. Midwinter break. Here is another anthology of Indigenous literature from Canada, All My Relations, an anthology of contemporary Canadian native fiction edited by Thomas King, one of my favorite writers, published in 1990. Stories by, I'll give you a sense of some of the authors that I am familiar with. Ruby Slipperjack, I haven't read her, but the name is familiar. Thompson Highway. Jordan Wheeler, I believe I've heard that name. Beth Brandt, Thomas King, of course. He would be in his own anthology. Joan Crate, I didn't know she was Indigenous. How fabulous. Daniel David Moses. Those are the ones I'm familiar with, so I'm even more interested in the stories by the ones I've never heard of. Like, here is a Indigenous name. Initial S. Bruised Head. Never heard of that writer and want to now. And the person that had this before me has got lots of notes. Most of them are in pencil. I think it'll probably bother me too much. It might supplement the text. Sharon, Butala, one of my mom's favorite writers. She is a Saskatchewan writer, but she's recently, in the last 10 years maybe, moved to the adjoining province, Alberta. But this is a little book called Coyote's Morning Cry, Meditations and Dreams from a Life in Nature. That might be a good candidate for Shorty September, coming in at 116 pages, but also for Springathon next year. What little I've read by Sharon Butala, I've quite liked. I haven't read any of her nonfiction. Now I have this. Speaking of Sharon Butala, here is another of her novels that I'd never had before, or certainly read. The Fourth Archangel, published in 1992, so it's quite an early novel, I think. And it is set in a dying prairie town. Let's listen to the opening paragraph, shall we? Amy could not think what was to be done. She had been this way ever since she'd wakened this morning. She'd left the stove turned on under the coffee pot and had to drive a mile back to turn it off. Before that, she couldn't seem to get herself dressed, putting on one garment, forgetting the rest, walking into the kitchen barefoot, and in her nightgown with her cotton slacks under it, drifting back to take off the nightgown and put on a bra, then sitting absently on the side of the bed, staring at her sandals, lying this way and that on the crooked and wrinkled scatter rug. She wondered if she'd remember to brush her hair. Touching it with her palm and feeling its smoothness, she knew she must have, then recalled viscerally the feel of the cool, tarnished handle of the silver brush against her palm. The brush had been her mother's, and its satisfying tug in her long, sleep-tangled hair. Well, that's quite a beautiful paragraph about a woman who's kind of a little bit, not sure if she's coming or going. I have been curious about the Indigenous writer in Canada, Hayden Taylor, forever, and haven't read anything by him yet. So when I saw this, which looks to be personal essays, I snatched it up. Funny, you don't look like one. Observations from the blue-eyed Ojibway. Apparently, from the title, Hayden Taylor has blue eyes. This was published in 1998. Well, I shall check it out. With the possible exception of Thomas King's mystery novels, I want to read everything the man has written. And this is an early novel, Medicine River, and that paperback edition is in pristine condition. 1989. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs of the chapter 1. The first italicized part is a letter to Rose, and then I'll read the paragraph right after that. The protagonist, Will, is coming home to Medicine River to his mother's funeral, and plot ensues. Dear Rose, I'll bet you never thought you'd hear from me again. I've thought about calling or writing, but you know how it is. How are you and the boys? Bet they're getting big. Bet you're probably mad at me, and I don't blame you. I'm going to be in Calgary for a rodeo. Thought I might drop in and see you. ... And then the first full paragraph. Medicine River sat on the broad back of the prairies. It was an unpretentious community of buildings banked low against the weather that slid off the eastern face of the Rockies. Summer was hot in Medicine River and filled with grasshoppers and mosquitoes. Winter was cold and long. Autumn was the best season. It wasn't good, just better than the other three. Then there was the wind. I generally tried to keep my mouth shut about the wind in Medicine River. Well, that sounds like Alberta. And it makes me think of Medicine Hat. I don't know if there is a Medicine River. Somebody will tell me. But Medicine Hat is a city that I have driven through many times in my life because it was on the way to my grandparents in Alberta. And it was sure windy around those parts. A writer that, since his death, pretty much everybody has forgotten about, and I am not qualified to make such a blanket statement, but I've certainly never heard anybody on BookTube talk about him. And that is the author V.S. Pritchett, a British author. And he has often been touted as one of the best short story writers in the world, and I have only read one of his short stories. I had it on an ebook. I read it to Lindy during the Concussion Reading Project, and we were both, actually I can't remember Lindy's reaction, but I was a little bit underwhelmed by it, but it was only one out of a large collection, and I will try more. But in the meantime, I thought this collection of his essays might be the next thing I try. The Talebearers, and then the subtitle is V.S. Pritchett on Swift, Kipling, Conrad, Green, James, Wilson, Bellow, O'Connor, Lady Murasaki, and other English and American writers, characters, and exotics. Frank Kermode called him the finest English writer alive. Gore Vidal called him the greatest English language critic. This was published in 1980. If you've ever read anything by V.S. Pritchett, I really need your comment below. This is a work of literary criticism, or literary criticism, I guess is the best, which is not something I typically read a lot of, but it is about the Canadian West. It's called Coyote Country, Fictions of the Canadian West by Arnold E. Davidson. And it is about just what the title says. I see that some of the authors that are written about here are Nellie McClung, Margaret Lawrence, Thomas King, Anne Cameron, Neil Bissundath, Sheila Watson, and so on. I have referred to this novel at least half a dozen times and I plan to reread it. I gotta get the price tag off the cover because otherwise it is in brand new condition. Bee Season by Myla Goldberg. It was made into a movie. It's a horrible movie, but it's a wonderful novel. Eliza Nauman is a young girl, and she is really good at spelling. She comes from a completely dysfunctional family, and there's all kinds of dysfunctional Jewish family, and there's all kinds of spiritual stuff, religious stuff, and family neurosis at play. And the thing that I have mentioned more than once, and I'm going to mention it one more time about this novel, I loved it, everything about it, but what I've never forgotten is that this female author, and is this her debut? Yeah, I think it's her debut. In this debut novel by Myla Goldberg, she writes a scene of a 14 or 15-year-old boy jerking off. And she writes her way down into his body in such a deep, throbbing, I have to use that. It's very sexual, it's very sensual, it's very erotic, but it's so much more than that. She just pierces through into the adolescent male psyche, and it was just one of the most incredible passages I've read in all of modern literature. So, looking forward to rereading the whole novel, but really looking forward to rereading that passage with a pillow on my lap. One of my favorite writers is Edna O'Brien, and I picked up this novel. I know nothing about it. It's called Wild December. I don't like this flaw. Look at this. The paper was not cut exactly right, so it's sticking out, but I can take a pair of scissors to that. This novel is from 1999, a family drama, The Warring Sons of Warring Sons. So kind of like a saga of a kind of a feud type thing, perhaps, in the countryside of Western Ireland. That is absolutely all I need to know about it. So about what I read, when I choose to read something from the book, I preview it, just usually in the moment that I'm filming, to see if the opening sentence or the opening paragraph has some kind of a standalone vitality. And if it doesn't, I don't judge the book because it doesn't, but I don't read it if it doesn't. This one does have a standalone vitality. But the other thing is, I'm going to read you the opening paragraph from the prologue. I usually skip over the prologue and go to chapter 1 to decide whether or not to read that opening sentence or paragraph, but this opening paragraph from the prologue sounds quite wonderful, as I expect when it's Edna O'Brien. So let's have a listen. Cloontha, it is called, a locality within the bending of an arm. A few scattered houses, the old fort, lime dank and jabbery, and from the great whooshing belly of the lake, between grassland and callow land, a road, sluicing the little fortresses of ash and elder, a crooked road to the mouth of the mountain. Fields that mean more than fields, more than life and more than death too. In the summer months, calves going suck, 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 blue dribble threading from their black lips, their white faces stark as clowns. Hawthorn and whitethorn, boundaries of dreaming pink, by-road and bog-road. The bronze gold grasses in a tacit but unremitting sway. Listen. Shiver of wild grass and cluck of wild fowl. Quickening. That is gorgeous enough to be a poem if you just put in a bunch of haphazard line breaks, but oh my God, I love that paragraph so much, especially this sentence. The second sentence. A few scattered houses, the old fort, lime dank and jabbery, and from the great whooshing belly of the lake, between grassland and callowland, a road, and so on. That first part. Oh, Edna. And this is a later collection of short stories by the godlike Irish writer William Trevor. A bit on the side. Gorgeous hardcover edition with speckled edges. Not speckled edges. What do you call them? Speckled edges. I'm not drunk. I'm just tongue-tied. Speckled. Jagged. No. Speckled edges. What the hell is it called? Deckled, with deckled edges. There's a, I better add that to the blooper reel. And this was published in 2004. Another one by Sharon Butala. This is called Real Life, and these are short stories. 2002. So many Sharon Butala books, so little time. Now this is the funny one. When I got I think I bought 2 boxes of books at that sale, and when I lugged them all home up to my mom and dad's, didn't have an apartment yet, and started going through them, I thought, what the hell? I didn't buy this book. But when I was browsing in this large hall type room, huge room, I kept bringing stacks of books to the front because I couldn't carry them all, and they were putting them in boxes. And somehow another book that I definitely did not pick got in there, and I bought it. And it is The Lucky Sperm Club by Rebecca Eckler. I thought, what the hell is this? And then I got home and looked at it. I mean, because the title and the cover and the cover image, it makes it sound really the exact opposite of a Sean book. I mean, if it was a sexy man on the cover with this title, I might be quite interested. But then I looked a little bit at the plot description just for a lark, and it doesn't sound nearly as stupid as it looks. It's a debut adult novel by a YA writer, Rebecca Eckler. It still doesn't sound like a Sean book, but it doesn't sound so stupid as it did. So it's about children born to outrageously wealthy parents, and that is called The Lucky Sperm Club. A single mother and her 4-year-old dad inherit a whole bunch of money, like a multi-million-dollar inheritance, and their life changes. So yeah, it's probably still not for me, but it just it has a review from the Kirkus Reviews. Do they review trash? Somebody will tell me. No, actually, I think it's probably still trash. What do you think? Let's have a look at the opening. Well, the opening sentence of the prologue is, "I should never have slept with the headmaster." Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going back to my initial opinion when I first saw the book in my box. Anybody want a buddy read this? Dear. Another collection by Alice Munro, Dear Life. Wasn't it one of the very last ones? I haven't read it. 2012, I think that's getting to be when she hung up or when she put her pen down. Let's listen. I'm not going to preview it. I'm just going to read you the opening paragraph of the first story, To Reach Japan. Once Peter had brought her suitcase on board the train, he seemed eager to get himself out of the way, but not to leave. He explained to her that he was just uneasy that the train should start to move. Out on the platform, looking up at their window, he stood waving, smiling, waving. The smile for Katie was wide open, sunny, without a doubt in the world, as if he believed that she would continue to be a marvel to him and he to her forever. The smile for his wife seemed hopeful and trusting, with some sort of determination about it, something that could not easily be put into words and indeed might never be. If Greta had mentioned such a thing, he would have said, "Don't be ridiculous," and she would have agreed with him, thinking that it was unnatural for people who saw each other daily, constantly, to have to go through explanations of any kind. Well, that is lovely. And here is a book that I have already read. I read it on Scribd as an ebook, and I found a copy for cheap at this charity sale. The Literary History of Saskatchewan, Volume 1, edited by David Carpenter, my prof. I talked about a book of his essays in the previous book, and this one I definitely want to have for reference. It was really interesting. And Volume 2, I don't imagine I'm going to find for $2, but I would be willing to pay full price for it just to read it. This was published in 2013, and it starts with an essay on Cree literature in Saskatchewan and Saskatchewan literature before 1905, narratives of trade, rebellion, and settlement. I got so much out of those, but it was also, I was very new to reading about Indigenous history in my part of the world. So these essays I will return to again and again and get more and more out of them. So very happy to have this. And finally, I could make this a long video because I've got energy and I've got wine, and certainly more books to haul, but I think I'm going to make it short so that I'll get it edited and up on my channel sooner rather than later. So the final book is, I think, the only novel by Rohinton Mystery I haven't yet read, and many say it's his best, Family Matters. Look at that cover image. Yes, this is gorgeous. It's got a slightly creased spine, but there's no bow, and I can't wait to read it. But also because I know it's the only novel of his I haven't read. There was a Tales of the Feroza Bag, his short story collection that I haven't read. And then that's it, and he hasn't put anything out for over 20 years, I don't think. This is 2002. So I might put this off until I'm a very old man, just to have something to look forward to. Let's listen to the opening paragraph. A splash of light from the late afternoon sun lingered at the foot of Neriman's bed as he ended his nap and looked towards the clock. It was almost 6. He glanced down where the worn patch had lured his toes. Knurled and twisted, rendered bird-like by age, they luxuriated in the sun's comfort. His eyes fell shut again. Yes, Rohinton mystery. Please bring out another novel. If you do, I'll read this one sooner. That's my book haul. What have you read? What sounds interesting to you? And stay tuned for the next one, because I got a whole pile more to tell you about. Thanks for watching.